There I was in 2009 in the foothills of the Andes Mountains in Peru. I was surrounded by a culture I was unfamiliar with. I was surrounded by a religion I had no idea its beliefs. It was my first time out of the United States, and I was supposed to go share Jesus with these people. But I had no idea what I was getting into because I didn't even know the very people I was supposed to share Jesus with. And this is what I present to you today. The people I met in 2009 were the Incans. And what I was presented was an Incan religion that I was very unfamiliar with. So I'm going to present today how we can reach these people. A quick overview. Now, the Incan Empire rose to its fame between 1200 and 1533. It's located in the Andes Mountains, primarily in Peru because the capital is Cusco. Now, the language they spoke then is still spoken today, and it's Quechua. You see, the Incan religion, it didn't emerge out of isolation. It was a fusion of earlier Andean belief systems that we're going to look at today. Before the Incan Empire ever existed, the Andes Mountains were home to some of the oldest spiritual cultures we see. The Incans didn't invent their own religion from scratch. They inherited it and they refined it along the way. And so what we're going to do today is look at 4 eras that really give us what we know today as the Incan religion. Now, the first era was the very roots of it, from 3000 BCE to 1200 CE. That's over 4,000 years. And what we see is that the earliest civilizations of the roots of the Incan culture were some known as the Carl Supe from 3000 BCE. And what these rise and fall of civilization showed us is that deep-rooted within it was already a feel and an idea of deities. The very first deity we see is a composite deity. It was half jaguar, half serpent, half bird. And what it symbolized is that there is cosmic power and that transformation comes. What we also see was that some of the earliest tribes worshiped what we call huacas, meaning every living thing, every mountain, every water, even the very stones that made their houses were spiritually charged, meaning they were divine of itself. And so to bring peace, to bring harmony, to bring the good seasons of harvest amidst the bad seasons of famine, they needed to reach out to these deities. And so what ended up happening was that ritual offerings became a stakehold in the religion, in the society. Ancestor veneration. And it was all for the purpose of bringing cosmic stability and cosmic harmony. There had to be a balance. And so what they would do is they would pray, they would offer sacrifices and festivals to each one of these deities. And then that led way to what we see as the rise of the Incan culture and religion from 1200 to 1438. Now, early Incans were many different tribes throughout the Andes Mountains. But as they moved and progressed from one composite deity into a patron deity. This patron deity was called Inti. Inti was the patron deity of the sun, and it gave each tribe this royal source of legitimacy. And we see as these tribes worshipped all one patron deity, Inti, they began to merge together. Civilizations and cultures that were separate began to become one. And with this became the merging of a polytheistic society. The Incans worshipped many gods, and there was a hierarchy within that. I call it a polytheistic bureaucracy. And ultimately, this gave way to the idea that religion and politics were of one. They were to unite all the tribes together. And who rose to that power when this happened? None other than the Incan Empire. From 1438 to 1533, it was known as the Golden Age of Incan theology. It's where faith was saturated in state ideology. Pachacuti Inca Yupanqui, I'm just going to call him Pachacuti, rose as the first emperor of the Incan Empire. He recognized himself as the son of Inti. Now, what this did, this reflected an intellectual and philosophical turn in society, where religion was so immersed in every day of life that they wouldn't even call it religion. The cosmos was organized as the center, Cusco, the home, the capital of the Incan Empire, was organized as the center of the world, of the cosmos. The navel is what they called it. And what all the purpose of this was to bring balance and harmony. Today, in our Western culture, we see moral laws, ethics, as ways to live in society. We have civic laws, civil codes. That is not how it worked in the Incan culture. A great example is their idea of Hanan Pacha, Kai Pacha, and Uku Pacha. And what that is their understanding of the upper realm where the gods live. Kai Pacha is where the humans live. And then you have the underworld, and that's where the ancestors and the spirits lived. You see, the afterlife just mirrored what was happening here on earth. It wasn't one was better, like going to heaven or going to hell based on moral ethics. It was just there to create balance. Because something had to be up there, something had to be down here. Their whole state of being was about bringing balance and harmony. And this really was reflected through sacrifices and festivals. In their 100-year reign, they are recognized as sacrificing over 4,000 children, servants, concubines, all for the purpose of bringing harmony, of making sure the famine that just happened was going to be followed by a great harvest, making sure that the drought that came was going to be followed by plenty of rainfall. That is their cultural understanding. It just wasn't a religion, it was the way of life for them. And as a result, ancestral influence was paramount to them. The Incans believed that the ancestors, especially the deceased rulers, continued to influence the living world. It blurred the boundary between life and death, making the living and the dead united. We call this transtemporal. And that is why sacrifices and rituals to the dead are so widely seen. A side note, even today, all around us, but specifically in the Hispanic culture, we see Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead. It's the same idea that the dead actually have a say in what happens and how the dead can bring balance and harmony on our behalf. But this quickly came to an end, sort of, in 1533 because the Spanish Inquisition happened. You see, Francisco Pizarro in 1533 launched from Spain and landed in Peru and destroyed all their temples, destroyed all their idols, and gave way for the Catholic Church to speak Christianity into this culture. But what it really did was just give us blended spirituality. And what I mean by that is the Incans, although they would take on the name of Jesus Christ, they just saw that as the Inti, their sun god. Pachamama, which was their earth god, their earth mother, well, that was just adapted into Mother Mary. So they still preserve their ancient religion, but under Christian symbols. So one has to beg to question, are they really serving Yahweh and Jesus? Or is it still Inti they're serving? What I think will help with this is how to approach them now with the gospel. Knowing their civilization, knowing their culture and their roots, and through the years, how do we today present the gospel to them? To help us with this, I have a story about Zara. Zara was born in the Middle East, and she moved to the United States to go to college in New York. And in college, she was presented with the gospel, but a very westernized understanding of the gospel, meaning as much good as she did as kind of a person, she realized that she still was missing the mark. Even her hard heart, her anger she'd build up, that automatically canceled her ability to be right with God. But that didn't end there. Jesus Christ came down and offered his blood to forgive her, to wipe her guiltness away, and give her an innocent new life and right relationship with the Father. Now this, of course, is a very common story of the gospel in our modern day. But for her, it worked. She gave her life to Jesus as a result. Just a couple weeks after this, she was walking on the street one night, coming home from dinner by herself, and she was brought into an alley and assaulted by two men. But walking across the street was her uncle. She could reach out and get help from her uncle. But again, she was from a different culture. Her upbringing let her know that she lived in an honor-shame mentality. If she reached out to her uncle in the midst of this assault, she would bring shame upon her family. So she got assaulted, and it overburdened her. So a couple weeks later, she presented to her mother what happened to her. And her mother's first response was to tell Zara to go to the grave of her ancestors and to eat the dirt off the ground with the way to commune with them, to bring harmony and peace, so they will no longer be cursed. What I presented to you is something that we need to understand when presenting the gospel to different religions of different cultures, is that every culture has its own understanding. Here in the Western world, we believe in an innocent guilt. That's kind of how our ethics, our laws are written up. But for Western or Eastern culture, it's not innocent guilt, it's honor, shame. But even more than that, in tribal cultures, it's something called fear, power. And what we see the Incan religion fall under is this fear, power. And what is important about this is the existential question. And their existential question is this: how can I access the power of the ones that control life? Let me repeat that. In a fear-power culture, in a fear-power religion, the existential question that they're seeking is, how can I access the powers that control life? And for them, when everything is huaca, when everything is spiritually charged, they need to access all of it, which is why we see sacrifices and rituals to all things. So what's going to help us when reaching and approaching them with the gospel is just knowing and having a common language. Here is over a couple dozen words that will really hit home with this culture. Words are really powerful, and it bridges a gap a little more because these words will stick out because this is very familiar territory with these words. I'm not going to read them all. You can read them. But it's really important to have a common language that unifies and bridges this gap. And these words are what we need to incorporate into our vocabulary when reaching an Incan religion. What's super fascinating is that another way that is being proven and shown to be true is that a culture, a religion similar to that of a fear power, similar to our Incan brothers and sisters, is signs and powers and wonders. They will hear the gospel. They will hear truth, not just with their eyes, not just with their mind, but when they see it and feel it become tangible. And so my prayer, and as we approach them, we need to be bold in what Holy Spirit has given us in these signs and wonders. We see Acts 13 give this beautiful example of Paul doing this very thing. Prophecy. 1 Corinthians 14, again, Paul's writing to a culture very similar to our Incan brothers and sisters. Prophecy is going to win their hearts to Jesus, challenging the powers of their ancestral gods. We saw this with Moses and Pharaoh, We saw this with Elijah and Baal, and we can still and need to still see this today with our Incan brothers and sisters. Lastly is dreams. You know what's so fascinating is that Islam is the fastest growing religion in our modern day. And what missionaries are doing is that the voice of sharing the gospel is actually losing its power, but what is gaining power is that they are praying that these Muslims, these are experiencing Jesus in dreams. And at wild numbers, we are seeing Muslims convert to Christianity because they experience Jesus in dreams. This is a fundamental, in my opinion, aspect of reaching the Incan culture and Incan religion, is having them experience Jesus in dreams. Jason Georges, in his book 3D Gospel, puts it this way: for a fear-power culture to receive Jesus, it may require power proof, not reasoning or logic, to believe that the lordship of Christ. People must tangibly see the power of God in our daily life. That's super powerful. Okay, so what next? So let's say they do have a dream. They do see the challenge of their ancestors and are given ear to something else. How then do we present the gospel? Well, I want to focus on some major points that I think will help when sharing verbally the gospel. The first one is God, Yahweh. The number one critical thing that we need to present is that He is the creator, the only creator. Genesis 1 is a beautiful chapter to turn to because it shows that He spoke the sun, the moon, the land, the water into existence. These things are not spiritually charged of itself. It is only one, Yahweh, our God that we serve, that is the creator. He's also the sustainer. If He isn't sustaining, then the seasons have no power. Then the cold of winter is not cold. The heat of summer is not hot. Genesis 8 is a beautiful story of God recreating after the flood, and it shows and holds Him as accountable for holding this all up. Ultimately, we need to present that God is king over all. Psalms 47:7 says it beautifully: for God is the king of all the earth. Sing to Him a psalm of praise. But what's fascinating is that this God offers us, His people, His spiritual authority. Genesis 1 is beautiful again because it shows that humanity's creation was meant and intended to rule on God's behalf in relationship with Him. That is a very important aspect. I think our Incan brothers and sisters will be fascinated and really drawn to hear. Exodus 19:5, as God is recalling His covenant people back to Him, here's what He says: now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. But something goes awry pretty quickly. It is because of our sin, our not following and receiving God's authority, because He's the only one who has it. Our evil ways separate us from His divine power. Genesis 3 is a clear example of this if this is a really good go-to verse. Secondly, because of the separateness, it now gives way for the darkness to rule over this earth. We have an evil one as the prince of this earth. I think this is already fundamental to their belief, although they may not call it sin. They understand that there is a ruler, maybe multiple realms of rulership that is not their own. But instead of appeasing those, we need to present Jesus, the Messiah. We need to show that Jesus is Yahweh Himself in flesh. John 1:1-14 is a beautiful verses and to go to for this. But not only that Jesus is Yahweh Himself, Jesus has conquered all. He has conquered all the spiritual evil forces. And so we don't have to fear. We don't have to submit to these evil forces. For them, they do not have to offer sacrifices to these spirits anymore. There is one God, and He's Jesus. And He alone conquers. He alone is king over all. Revelation gives this most beautiful depiction. It says, they will wage war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will triumph over them because he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And with him will be his called, chosen, faithful followers. This is what we're presenting to them, is that there really is only one, and he's here with us, and he is the conqueror. So how can a broken, fallen away people be one again with the King? Well, this is the salvation story, is that Jesus gave himself to us, meaning his very conquering life he has given to us. Galatians 2:20 is a great go-to verse to show them that his conquering life has now become our own. In Jesus, we are now conquerors. Not by praying, not by finding cosmic harmony, but by Jesus living in us. And when we have him, we have all we need. Now, to conclude this presentation, I revealed to you the Incan culture that started 3,000 years before Jesus and how it developed over the years. And not only did it develop in its culture, it developed in its religion, because for them there was no separation. And what they honored and what they saw as a cosmic balance was the appeasing of all the wakas. And so for us today, when we present the gospel, when we pray for signs and miracles, when we verbally use common linking language, when we present God as King, Jesus as conqueror, salvation as his new life, what's going to bring this all home is what Jesus says in John 15. They, the world, the Incan culture, the Incan religion, our brothers and sisters in the Andes Mountains of Peru are going to know who Jesus is and who we are by how we love. So when we go out and live boldly, not in fear, not in bringing cosmic balance, but in loving them so sacrificially, they will want to know why. Why are we so willing to love them and possibly disrupt this cosmic balance? And it's in those moments, by how we serve, by how we give of ourselves, by how we just love and become the hands and feet of Jesus, they will be exposed to something that is foreign to them. Just like something was foreign to me in 2009, becoming a follower of Jesus and loving like the hands and feet of Jesus, that is going to bring foreign soil onto their own ground. They're going to want to know why. And that is when we have the great chance to say, I love you, not to bring cosmic balance, because the King is here and loves you. And that's all we need in life. I hope this was helpful at understanding, learning, and knowing in Incan culture, in Incan religion, and how to most effectively present the gospel to them. May God have mercy on us. Thank you.